Hey everyone, Robert Smith here. Before we jump into our episode today, Chapter 4, Town Brawls, I just wanted to take a moment of your time and check in with you and see how everything is going. Obviously, we are about a quarter of the way through the movie, and I really hope that you are enjoying this. I hope that you're getting some entertainment out of it, even if it's taking a half hour of your brain space to just zone out and listen to my soothing, dulcet tones. I hope that's what's happening with you. This is the last of the initial episodes that I did before launching the podcast. So as I'm talking to you right now, I'm getting ready to go on vacation, to go back home and see my family. And a lot of exciting things. I got the National Bowling Tournament coming up in Las Vegas. So some things that are on my calendar that I knew that I was going to not be able to deliver the weekly podcast for. So I got a couple of them in the can, and this will be the last of those. Then moving forward, we should be able to continue hitting our weekly goal and getting those to you every Sunday morning. With the end of this fourth episode, I want to reach out to you and I want to know what you think. So please, I know I say it at the end of every episode, but I truly want to know what your thoughts are, what your feedback is. So please, if you haven't already, check out our Facebook page. It's Support Your Local Podcast. Go on your favorite podcatchers, rate and review us. Hopefully it's a good review. If it's not, I understand, but let me know what I can do to make it better. I have some ideas of some changes that I want to make now that I've heard the episodes. I've kind of seen what was out there and then talking to a couple of you. It's been some exciting feedback, and I really look forward to continuing doing this for you. For those that don't know, this is something that is going to continue. So obviously we are going to finish this movie, all 16 chapters. We are now in chapter 4. After that, I would like to go and take a look at the quote-unquote sequel, Support Your Local Gunfighter. If there is an audience there for that, if that's something that you want to see, that is something I definitely want to do for you. And then I do have the next actual movie set up and lined up. My friends in the Movies by Minutes group, they've already seen the sneak peek of what I would like to do next. I do have about 4 or 5 movies that I would really like to do going forward. So as long as you're there and you're listening and you're enjoying this, I'm going to continue to do it. I get a kick out of this. Those that listen to episode 0, you know that this is a bucket list item for me, and I cannot express just how exciting it is for me to do this. So as long as I have one listener out there, even if it's my mom, so be it. I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to continue putting that out into the world. I do have some exciting news coming up in the next few episodes. I'll try to keep you abreast of those. Best way to find out about what's going on, what updates are out there, any bonus content, as always, is to hit up our social medias, Facebook and Instagram. We're there, Support Your Local Podcast. We do have the YouTube channel, Support Your Local Podcast. Keep us on the feed, keep us going. Another thing I wanted to touch base, I promise I'll get you to your episode as soon as I can, is I've talked to several of my friends that are listening to the show, and they've reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to have to check out this movie. And I knew going into this that this was going to be a very niche thing. Obviously, this is a 1969 movie. It's not necessarily one that's on everybody's radar. It's not necessarily one that people have watched. And people my age, I'll be 40 this year. I probably shouldn't even know that this movie exists. The only reason I do is watching it so many times on TBS with my dad, waiting for wrestling to come on, the 605, the Superstation stuff. But I fell in love with the movie through that. But it sometimes I just forget that, oh yeah, not a lot of people have probably seen this. So hopefully, as you're listening to this, you're watching along. You've at least watched this, hopefully for your first time. If it's for your millionth time, props to you too. Me too, buddy. As of this recording, it is free on YouTube. It is free on Pluto TV. I believe it's still free on Freevee, which is IMDb TV, what it was at the beginning of this podcast. So definitely check it out. It's funny. It is old. A lot of the comedy is cornball, but there's some good script writing in there, and there's some good visual gags. It's not Blazing Saddles. It's not meant to be. It's before Blazing Saddles, but I think that if you watch it, you're going to get at least a chuckle in watching. So if you're listening to the show, please check out the actual movie. Watch along with us. Let us know what some of your favorites are. If this is your first time watching it, definitely leave me some feedback on Facebook. Let me know who all out there is watching this for the first time just because of our show. But that's all I have, guys. I just wanted to touch base with you, let you know what's going on. There are going to be some changes to some of the segments, how we go forward with the show, just some things that I'm trying to improve on, some new things that will come up. But I want to keep you entertained. I want to keep you engaged. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, please reach out to me. Let me know what's going on. But until then, as always, please support your local podcast.
He stuck his finger in the end of your what?
Howdy, everyone. Pull up a chair, kick up your boots, and take a sip on a nice cold sarsaparilla.
Sarsaparilla. What? Well, I would write it down, but I don't figure you could read it. Soda pop.
It's Support Your Local Podcast, the show where we take a look at the 1969 Western comedy classic, Support Your Local Sheriff, one chapter at a time. I am Robert Smith, your host, coming to you from beautiful Tombstone. Yes, that one. Today we're going to take a look at Chapter 4, Town Brawls. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to kind of set the scene, set the mood a little bit. Let's take a look at the world that the movie is set in, as well as the movie that the world was released to, in a segment that I like to call It Came in '69.
That gun had gone off and it blown right up in the face.
It wouldn't have done my finger a hell of a lot of good either, would it?
In 1869, the American Museum of Natural History is founded in New York. The state of Morelos is created in Mexico. Arabella Mansfield became the first woman in the United States awarded a license to practice law at Mount Pleasant, Iowa. James Gordon Bennett Jr. of the New York Herald asked Henry Morton Stanley to find Dr. David Livingston. Dr. Livingston, I presume? Frederick Meischer purifies nuclein, which was then identified as deoxyribonucleic acid. Easy for you to say. Let's just call it DNA. Let's jump forward a little bit to 1969, where the movie was released. Dr. Denton Cooley implants the first temporary artificial heart in Houston, Texas. On foot, covering 3,720 miles in 16 months, English explorer Sir Wally Herbert reaches the North Pole and becomes the first man to cross the frozen surface of the Arctic Ocean. Oliver wins the Best Picture at the 41st Academy Awards, while Barbra Streisand, nominated for Funny Girl, and Katharine Hepburn for Lion in Winter, tie for Best Actress. In Ithaca, New York, some 80 armed militant black students from Cornell University take over Willard Straight Hall, demanding a Black Studies program to make a deal for total amnesty with the administrators. Sirhan Sirhan is sentenced to death for the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. And Robin Knox Johnson becomes the first person to sail around the world without stopping and entirely on his own. This has been It Came in '69.
Wow!
And we're back. We start our chapter off with Jason walking out of the store. We see the crowd on the boardwalk doing as the mayor instructed. They're enjoying the show. And I noticed that there was a display of rakes and shovels there. And if you look, one of the crowd is holding one of the rakes. And being a former Walmart loss prevention guy, I know a potential shoplifter when I see one. This is a perfect time to lift something. The crowd is distracted by the fight. That rake is going to walk away, I promise you. I noticed that manual labor just really isn't fitting for a man of the mayor's stature, because I noticed that while he's the one that hands the hose to Jason, he leaves the heavy work for the councilman and the other townsfolk. If you take a look at the fire engine, paint protection knows a couple things that aren't necessarily accurate. One, there's no water source for this engine, and it doesn't have a water tank on it, so I'm not entirely sure where this is coming from. And it's interesting that while the townsfolk are pumping the wagon, there's a modest amount of water coming out of the hose. But when Jason says a little more, we cut back to the group and they're pumping at the same rate that they were before. But now there is the pressure of today's fire hoses, which is forceful enough to begin knocking down people in the rowdy mob. While the group working the fire truck are smiling and laughing at the fun and games being had, you notice that the mayor is looking over Jason's shoulder with a little bit of dismay. And I'm left to wonder if he noticed that his daughter is caught up in the middle of this whole thing. As the crowd gets less and less muddy, we see from the bottom of the screen the first appearance of Mr. Jack Elam. And Jack is curious who this man was that was just shooting him in the face with a fire hose. And when Jason introduces himself as the new sheriff, the muddy mob begins to laugh at the prospect of yet another new sheriff. And Elam attempts to scare off Jason by going for his gun, but Jason is way faster and shoots the iron away from his hand. Couple notes. One, it was at this point in writing the script for my episodes that I noticed that we have a Joe, a Jason, a Jake, or we'll find out that his name is Jake. And they're played by a James and a Jack. So forgive me if I stumble over those names. You're going to hear me say sheriff a lot. You're going to hear me say Elam a lot. I'm going to try to avoid the confusion on those names as best that I can. But bear with me, please. God help me. Another side note, when we see the sheriff shoot the gun away from Jack Elam's hand, see, even then I had to stop and think about it. There are people completely around him, and one of them is a couple feet away and directly behind where his gun is. So how he was not winged by this bullet, I'll never know. And this is something that we brought up in the saloon fight with Joe Danby and the stranger. Is there should be a lot more of people getting friendly fired in these movies, but somehow it doesn't happen. But anyways, now that he's been subdued by this display of gunmanship, Elam's more than happy to listen to what the sheriff has to say. He even introduces himself to the sheriff, and as I mentioned earlier, his name is Jake. The sheriff asks Jake to go into the saloon and let Joe Danby know that the sheriff would be in there soon and he would be there to arrest him. And this obviously disturbs what is essentially being asked to perform a death wish. So Jake wants confirmation that the sheriff is indeed talking to him, and hoping that he perhaps got his muddy figures confused, but no luck. He was talking to him, and so Jake then wonders, and rightfully so, what the sheriff will do when Joe kills him for saying that, and the sheriff simply replies that he would then arrest Joe for both murders. Perfectly logical explanation. The mayor and the town council then take the sheriff to go see the new jail that they were bragging about. And while they're walking there, we get a shot of Madame Orrs in the background and with no one outside. And it was interesting, as rowdy as it was, it makes you wonder, did everybody come and watch the mud fight? It was at the event of the day that, even something as entertaining as Madame Orr's house, a good old-fashioned mud fight can take the crowd away. As they walk off, now would be a great time to take a good look at our remaining town councilman, the one that was delivering Millard's eulogy earlier. We are talking about Mr. Henry Jackson, played by Mr. Henry Jones, in a segment that I like to call Remember the Name.
That's about all I'm going to do the rest of my life is go around remembering your name.
So welcome to Remember the Name, the segment where we take a little bit of a deeper dive into the cast and crew, the movers and shakers, the makers of the movie, and kind of get to know them a little bit better. With a movie of so many famous stars and people that are known for so many roles. It's good to just kind of take a look and kind of get to know them. So today we'll be looking at Mr. Henry Jones. He was born August 1st, 1912. He left us May 17th, 1999. His first real break was in a Broadway appearance in Maurice Evans' 1938 Hamlet. He was someone who did serve in World War II. He served in the Army, and during that, he was cast in Irving Berlin's This Is the Army. He appeared in more than 180 films and television shows. So, recurring theme as we go through these actors, and particularly with his fellow councilman that we did in our previous episode, so many TV shows, so many films that we see these people in. So guarantee from the 50s to the 70s, you're going to see this man in something. Screen credits include The Girl Can't Help It with Jane Mansfield, the original 310 to Yuma, not the Russell Crowe version with Van Helsing, Will Successful Rock Hunter with Jane Mansfield and Tony Randall, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo with Jimmy Stewart, Cash McCall with James Garner, where they know each other from, The Bramble Brush with Richard Burton, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Paul Newman and Robert Redford, Dirty Dingus McGee with Frank Sinatra, which you'll hear several times as we go through the cast and crew. And of course, support your local sheriff and support your local gunfire. He will be one of the ones that returns. 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton and Lily Tomlin, and even something as recent as Arachnophobia with Jeff Daniels. So long storied career with these bit roles, but one that again you'll see him, you'll know him from. He is remembered for his role as handyman Leroy Jessup in the movie Bad Seed, a role that he had originated on Broadway. Other theater credits include My Sister Eileen, The Time of Your Life, They Knew What They Wanted, The Solid Gold Cadillac, and Sunrise at Campobello. And for that, he won a Tony Award for Best Performance by a Featured Actor in a Play. His last Broadway role was in Advise and Consent in 1961. He was a regular on Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Investigators, Bewitched, Night Gallery, The Mod Squad, Daniel Boone, Gunsmoke, The Twilight Zone, Adam 12, The Doris Day Show, Dukes of Hazzard, Magnum PI, The Untouchables, Kolchak the Night Stalker, MacGyver, Mr. Belvedere, Mary Tyler Moore, Falcon Crest, Lost in Space. He even guest starred 3 times on The $6 Million Man. So really, any TV show of this era, the 60s and 70s, you're probably going to eventually see him pop up on it. A long and storied career, much like his fellow councilman, one Mr. Henry Jones, again playing in this role, Mr. Henry Jackson. But this has been Remember the Name.
You tell him I remember his name.
And we're back. As we start with our crowd entering the jail, we whoop, 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 get our trope alert. A Western jail with wanted posters and a gun rack. So every Western that has a sheriff's station, I think, has this exact same gun rack that you'll see in the background. Usually has 6 guns on it. In this one, it has a double barrel shotgun and then quite a few rifles. But I think it's the exact same gun rack that I've seen in like Rio Bravo, El Dorado. Literally any movie that has a sheriff station, I think, has this exact same gun rack. So I don't know if that was just the style of the day or if it's literally the same gun rack. They're just reusing props. But keep an eye out when you're watching a Western for that exact type of gun rack. The wanted posters as well. This is where, depending on the Western, you'll see some historically accurate ones for a realistic feel. This is also another great place to put some comedy. So a lot of times you'll have the names of the production designers on there or cast and crew on there. For this one that stands out, and we'll probably touch on a couple of them as we go through. But if you see the one on the wall that says Ben Silas, that is actually an homage to Gunsmoke. They're the exact same wanted poster hung on a wall next to the door in quite a few Gunsmoke episodes. I found that on IMDb trivia. But yes, a definite trope in Westerns is the wanted posters. We spoke to a little bit in a previous episode about the dollar amounts on them being a little exaggerated in most cases. But just kind of take a peek and see what you can see and what you can read on those posters whenever you're watching a Western. Keep in mind that Jason said back at Emma's that he figured that he would go broke right around 2:30 this afternoon and he needed a job. He gets the sheriff's job, and as he's walking into the jail with the mayor and the councilman, the clock on the wall is 2:23 p.m. So he made it just in time. He had about 7 minutes before he was going to go broke. As to kind of keep on the topic of clocks, as the sheriff said he'd be in to arrest Joe in about 20 minutes. We'll see how good the sheriff's time management skills are. So there's already about an hour's difference between the clock that was in the hardware store and the one that's in the jail. I don't know if maybe one didn't get reset for daylight savings time, whatever that may be. Maybe the one in the hardware store just isn't an accurate time, but we'll go off this one from the time being, because this is predominantly the clock that we'll see throughout the movie. So we'll just keep an eye out and see how good his time management skills are. There's a great shot of the sheriff and the crew being a line of heads looking towards the camera. And as the sheriff walks towards the back of the jail, we see that the camera was in fact shooting from the back window. And what the mayor had said is in fact true, that there are no bars in the cell of windows. They look on at the sheriff in pride, which quickly changes to confusion as Jason grabs a piece of chalk from a bench and he begins to draw a line across the floor where the bars of the cell should be. So again, I absolutely love the facial acting by this group, and there's so much conveyed through no dialogue. Jason then takes a bucket of red paint and he dribbles some on the floor by the chalk line. And you have a pretty good view of the entirety of the jail. And unless they painted the bricks red, there doesn't appear to be any reason to have an open bucket of red paint sitting there outside of its purpose that we'll see soon. The sheriff wants to get his things to the mayor's house to settle in and then go get Joe. And the mayor's still a little leery about wanting to go get him, but Fred stops him, impish smile and all. And as the sheriff leaves, the mayor and the council talk a bit about whether or not they're in fact murdering the sheriff by letting him do this, to which they wonder what the odds would be on 3 sheriffs being killed. And it's the law of averages. You look at the drummers for Spinal Tap, after all. And we close this chapter with the group walking off frame and out of the jail. So we're left to wonder what is going to happen when the sheriff indeed confronts Joe, this time with a sheriff's badge. But we'll find all of that out next time as we go into chapter 5. But until then, I hope you have been enjoying the podcast. I know I've had a blast making it. If you haven't already, check us out on our social media platforms. We are at Facebook and Instagram, Support Your Local Podcast. We have a YouTube channel where you can hear this podcast. It's Support Your Local Podcast. We appreciate any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, anything that you have on your mind. Let's start that conversation. Hit us up at Sup Your Local Podcast. That's SUPP Your Local Podcast at gmail.com. Or hit us up on the social media sites. Start that conversation going. Until then, as always, please subscribe if you haven't already on your favorite podcatcher. Catch us as early as we can. We try to do this weekly. Please rate and review us on said podcatcher. That's how we get moved up in the rankings. That's how we become bigger and better, being able to provide more entertainment for you. Also keeps you up to date for any news, information, any bonus material that we may be releasing. But until then, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you for your time. And as always, support your local podcast.
He stuck his finger in the end of your what?
Hello, I'm Robert T. Smith, host of Support Your Local Podcast. I want to take a moment to remind you to hit that fast forward button. That is, unless you want to hear about something good being done. Anyone who knows me knows that I love bowling. In 2016, I founded the Smith Family Bowling Scholarship Foundation, intended to honor my father's hard work and dedication to community service and award scholarships to youth bowlers throughout the nation. To date, we've awarded well over $15,000 in scholarships. If you are a bowler, know a bowler, have ever seen a bowler, or heard about anyone who has ever seen a video of a bowler, I'd love for you to help promote the SFBSF and its mission. Please go to sfbsf.com and see what we're all about. While you're there, please consider hitting that donate button and helping us make a brighter future for our youth. Again, that's sfbsf.com. Thank you for your time.